writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Right Pack.
Hello everyone and welcome to Right Pack Radio. I am the co-host, Kathleen Kayembe, filling in for David, who is out sick today.
Poor thing.
In the lungs.
Worse. Dun 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 dun.
I have not taken him out for my own hosting pleasure. I've introduced myself, Kathleen Kayembe. I write paranormal romance under the pen name Kaseka and Vita, and with me today...
I'm Jennifer Stolzer. I'm an illustrator and an author of fantasy stories.
Fedora Amos. I write Victorian whodunits like Jack the Ripper in St. Louis, and I'm president of Greater St. Louis Sisters in Crime.
Yay. Brad R. Cook. I write steampunk. Awesome.
Yeah.
And my novel Iron Horseman comes out in November. Check it out. Other than that, I am a publisher of Blank Slate Press and president of St. Louis Writers Guild.
I'm Melanie Kulaney. I write science fiction, fantasy, and nonfiction.
Alrighty, everybody. We are talking about reboots today. Reboots are different from something we were discussing before, which are new shows in the same series that do not restart continuity. A reboot takes the same thing and restarts the entire continuity, like Star Trek.
Could we, wait a minute, could we actually get a slightly clearer definition of reboots?
And this is why I'm
sadly,
the
we are not
co-host.
talking about Reboot, which
Reboot.
Jen and I would love. So just a quick
Reboot.
shout out to Reboot, all the
TV
Reboot
show.
fans. All right, yeah, that was a
The
cartoon.
first-
If you don't know it, go check it out.
It is historic. It is the first fully CG cartoon
Yes.
on daytime television.
Yes. Okay, what reboots actually are, though, as we talked about, are when you take an established series and you take that series and you twist it, you chuck continuity out the window, you chuck everything that the fans loved and cherished and wanted and everything, and you threw that out the window and you do your own thing.
You might have added a little bit of emotional.
Yeah.
Maybe just
tag.
an emotional
Okay,
plea. Come on,
and
is that
reboots
bad?
actually can be better than the original in theory.
Depending.
Yeah, depending, but the difference
It's
for
rare.
The
reboots
point-
is the original doesn't matter. Well, it's like
But then they will reboot the reboot and screw it up again.
Alright, so it sounds like there's already a lot of emotional angst in this topic, so...
I'm still looking for clarification here. Does
All right.
that mean that the only thing that is kept in the reboot is a title?
No.
That is a bad reboot.
That's a bad reboot. That's a horrible reboot.
Okay, here's an example where pretty much they only kept the title. So original, I don't know how many people saw this, but Hercules
Yeah.
is a myth. It's a Greek myth. I get Greek and Roman confused, but Hercules is the Greek version. Anyway, it's a basic story. He's the son of Zeus, and he has all these adventures. And there were some books written about that, and they've been made in many movies. And there was a TV series and all that. Well, this most recent movie of Hercules was definitely a reboot of that.
Why do you say that?
Yeah, but that's
What do
kind of
they
a
keep?
twist on old fables.
There's a difference between a reboot and an adaptation.
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be an adaptation because you're taking a myth and that has been adapted many times, retold in a new person's voice. A reboot would be if the Hercules movie that just came out was supposed to be based on the TV show.
Yes.
The TV show that was running alongside Xena. If that was what that movie was supposed to be of,
Sorbo.
only it started over again and it ignored everything that happened in that show, but it took the same universe and the same characters and the same look and feel of it and then started again, that would be a reboot.
Okay.
So once again,
Yes.
the only thing that is in common with the original then is like the background information.
No,
Not
the basic
necessarily.
story.
Hold on.
What?
So here, let me draw some classic examples
All
that
right.
might help explain this. The first off, we're going to talk about adaptations, okay? Take Sherlock Holmes. Now, Sherlock Holmes has been retold and retold and retold again, okay? And if you take the Johnny Lee Miller television show Elementary, that's not a reboot. That's an adaptation. They've twisted Watson. She's a woman now. They've moved it into modern day. That's all an adaptation. A
I will
reboot-
say that was the American version. In the English version, Watson is still male.
Hold on.
Well,
so
that's not elementary.
going to a reboot, so you have we'll take Transformers, okay?
Let's
A
take Transformers.
long-running television show, beloved by children. That got rebooted into another television show.
Yes.
That was the Transformers, the same characters, the same sort of backstory, but a complete new twist on how everything in the world was done. Now they've made a movie out of that. So what are they taking? They're taking the characters, they're taking the plot, in the sense of, so you have, these big, huge characters, your iconic characters. So you have, like, if you want to take Sherlock Holmes, you're going to have Sherlock, you're going to have Moriarty, you're going to have Watson, you're going to have these people. Do they have to live at 21 Baker Street? Not necessarily. But he has to be a detective going around. When you reboot, there's certain things you can do, but you have to keep the core of the story.
I think it has something to do with
I'm
also
still
who
lost.
owns the rights to it. Like, you reboot your own thing, but you adapt someone else's.
Yeah.
Can I offer an explanation?
Go for it.
Yeah, we've tried many times. Have a go.
All right. So, reboot. Do you know what you do when you reboot a computer? Turn it back on.
You start from scratch.
It's essentially like, a rebooted franchise is like a factory reset. It goes back to the original settings. The original settings for whatever
The
device you're on.
pilot? Is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
pretty
Yes.
much.
But then they
how
redo the
there's-
pilot, too.
It takes what you had.
No, it's the same thing, pretty much.
It takes
is
what you
she's
had,
thinking.
all of the franchise's storylines, narratives, all that continuity, and it takes it back to a single starting point and restarts it from there with
So
something
it
different.
ignores everything that once happened in
Yes.
the series.
Yes,
but-
it does. It can draw from those things, like those
So it
aspects
doesn't
of the universe.
necessarily, but it can.
It does.
Yes.
Like, it might happen again. I think that's the point.
Yeah.
Like, if
Oh, so
it's
they can
starting, it's like
retread an old
rewinding the
script,
story
huh?
back to an earlier point and then
And then
starting
it's over.
over. Spider-Man,
Yeah,
I was going to
Spider-Man,
do
good
Spider-Man.
example.
Okay, throw out Spider-Man.
Spider-Man is a perfect example. There have been a
Yes.
lot of Spider-Man movies recently. There were a lot of
Yes.
Spider-Man movies in the past, but recently they made a 3-movie, a trilogy about Spider-Man starring Tobey Maguire. I don't know if you've seen any of those.
I have.
Gets bitten by a spider. the
Yeah,
whole
it's
nine
like it retold his origin story. It reintroduced a bunch of villains that everyone already knew were Spider-Man's villains. It re-killed Uncle Ben. All those things. Those movies degraded into ridiculous pretty fast, and they realized quickly there was nothing more they could do with them monetarily, because people thought they were a joke after the third one. So then they rebooted it.
Well, that's
They-
also about keeping a license, too.
Yes, to keep the license, but they rebooted it. So they picked a new cast, they retold the spider bite portion, they re-killed Uncle Ben, they reintroduced all of these villains that we all know with a new set, and they
Different
tried
girlfriend.
again. So now they can continue from that continuity instead of the previous continuity.
Yes.
But it sounds to me like it's so repetitious, nobody'd want to see it.
It can be.
It can be. I think-
Or you're
the
just
rub.
introducing it to a new generation of kids who were five.
I thought of an example that's more iconic, maybe. Okay,
Maybe.
Superman, the radio show and the black and white TV show Superman. With Superman being Superman. Then there was the 70s version of Superman. That was a reboot of Superman. And then further on, now recently, there's been new Superman.
And what keeps it from being an adaptation is that we are retelling Superman. We might change some things, but he's in essence still the same dude being retold the same story
Might
as you
have
would
a
read a
weird-
book over again.
Yes.
An adaptation of Superman might decide, well, this time Superman, let's see what would happen if Superman happened at the end of the world. And there's
Or
a
it
comic
didn't
book
work.
series about that.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's more of a, let's retell it and think creatively about it.
I think
Or had that horrible
there is a
Kevin
difference
Smith, Nick
between
Cage-
a
or Nick Cage movie we
reimagining
made.
and a reboot, and I think that should be established pretty firmly.
Say that again, Kathleen, more clearly.
There should be, we need to establish a difference between a reimagining of a series or anything else and a reboot, because I feel like a reboot has a very specific set of circumstances to do with franchises and money and particular narrative storylines.
Yes.
Yeah, you're really taking the same story and telling it again.
Yes.
Because
But
an
what makes
adaptation
it a-
changes that.
But what makes it a reboot?
Okay.
Why isn't the Batman comic that imagines Batman or the Wolverine movie? why isn't the Ronin Wolverine comic a reboot of Wolverine? What makes that different from something like, say, X-Men? Where's I going?
Jen's wait.
It's the business aspect that makes it a reboot. That's what I meant by like the people who own the license. A great example would be My Little Pony. Mm-hmm. I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s in love with My Little Pony. And there was an 80s My Little Pony cartoon that I would watch every day before I took a nap. I loved it. I adored it. And then for a good portion of my growing up years, there was no My Little Pony because My Little Pony's popularity waned and was replaced with something else. Here recently, and a couple times in the past less successfully, but here recently, they just rebooted My Little Pony because they wanted to turn it into something that could be a new vehicle to get money for them and give it new life and take the same franchise but give it that reboot, start it over again, fresh start, let's go. And it's become very, very popular after doing that. That's a successful reboot of a franchise.
Mm-hmm. Okay. By that logic, then, it is impossible to reboot the Conan Doyle series of anything about Sherlock Holmes because it's now in the public domain since 2011.
I would agree with that.
With the proviso that you can certainly reboot your own adaptation of Sherlock Holmes.
And that's what we were saying. Sherlock is a perfect example of an adaptation, more so than a reboot, because a reboot really is taking the same story and putting in. Like, if you were to redo Hound of the Baskervilles, if you were to redo that story exactly the way it is, that's a reboot. But if you just take...
She just said it wouldn't be possible.
Here's the reason. Here's the reason I say that, because you're taking the full
On
canon
something
of it.
in
It's
public-
not necessarily about that. What you're doing is taking the whole story. An adaptation changes something. It's an adaptation of the original.
But a
reboot can change stuff, but it doesn't necessarily have
A reboot implies that it's a thing that had momentum, that then lost momentum, that you then give momentum again. That's rebooting it.
Who can reboot something?
Someone who's done it already.
No, more specific, because can I reboot Sherlock Holmes?
No, okay,
No.
here, take
Can I
Three
reboot
Musketeers.
the X-Men?
Sir
No, no.
Arthur Conan Doyle can reboot. Sherlock Holmes.
Take
I
Three
think that's
Musketeers. The
important.
Three
No,
Musketeers
it's in
starts
the
as a book.
public domain.
It continues on as, a number of movies. Each time, the same story gets told. D'Artagnan comes to Paris. Paris, meets
that's
all
not a
three of them.
That's not a
fights them.
reboot. I
But
think
that's not an
the
adaptation.
person who owns the rights
It's a
to
It
something.
keeps getting rebooted every
It's a
few
retelling.
It's a
12
retelling.
years. If you're going to call it a retelling, but
It's a
how's a
retelling.
retelling different from a reboot?
A retelling, like, I could
question.
retell you...
Because it's not.
Who owns
I still
it?
feel like reboot has that business aspect to it.
But
Okay,
retelling's the same thing.
Okay,
No,
so
retelling is something like I really love the story, I'm going to retell it. I'm adapting a version of a children's
Which is exactly
story
what
right
J.J.
now.
Abrams did. He took Star Wars, a beloved story, and he
But
retold it.
He retold it, but
Star Trek.
Star Trek. He retold it, but the license holders rebooted it. The businessmen rebooted it using his
See, I would say
retelling.
there's less of a definition between the
I think that's
story and the
interesting,
business.
though. I think that's
The
an
franchise was
interesting point.
rebooted, the story was retold.
So a person can retell something. It doesn't matter who that person is. But if the business behind that person owns whatever it is, the title it is that they're retelling, then it can be a reboot, depending on what they're doing to retell.
As far as I'm concerned, rebooting is, like you said, it's like hard setting a computer. You want to make it work again. When do you reboot something? You don't just reboot it for fun. That's not something you do to your computer for fun. You reboot it because it stopped working. And then you start it up again and hope it works this time. That's what a reboot is things wane, so they change something, sometimes for the worse. I mean, I'm going to pull out Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles real quick. They've rebooted that several times trying to get little kids to be interested in it. And it's worked for the most part. Every new reboot, which is like, same origin story, same four turtles, same personalities, same names, same circumstances, but with like a slick new veneer on it so that it's more applicable to children of this modern era or whatever. It's like, we're used to anime, so we're going to make them look more anime this time. Kids now like CG, so we're going to make them CG this time. It's all the decisions they're making have to do with whether or not it's now marketable, and that's what a reboot is.
Okay, I just looked up Wikipedia.
Which maybe we should have done earlier. Sorry, everyone.
So, in serial fiction, and maybe that's part of it, it needs to be a serial, not a one-off story. To reboot means to discard all continuity in an established series in order to recreate its characters, timeline, and backstory from the beginning. Okay, let's forget about entomology. We don't care about that right now. Types of reboot. Film. With reboots, filmmakers reinvigorate a film series in order to attract new fans and stimulate revenue.
There you go.
Reboots can renew interest in a series that has grown stale, can be met with positive, mixed, or negative results by the consumer and film critics. Reboots are also act as safe projects for the studio, with a reboot as an established fan base and is less risky in terms of expected profit than an entirely original work, while at the same time allowing the studio to explore new demographics. Video games. Reboots are common... Right. Yeah. But let's do comics, because comics is...
Yeah.
We're kind of done
I
with
think
that.
we're good.
But Jen, to let you know, on the Urban Dictionary, the number one definition of reboot is the cartoon show. Gotta love it.
Can we talk about some reboots? Because I feel like we have attacked the definition with gusto.
Yeah,
Well, we mentioned a bunch of them.
Let's take
you mentioned the biggest ones, like Spider-Man and Three Musketeers and Star Trek.
Let's take a positive spin. What are some of your favorite reboots and retellings?
Well, see, I would actually argue that one of my favorite retellings is the Disney version of Three Musketeers, which I think hits it right on the nose, probably better than most of other movies do.
Is this the one with, oh my goodness.
Charlie Sheen and
Yes.
Oh,
That
I thought
is
you were
the best
talking about the
thing
one
ever.
with Mickey
I
and
love that
Friends.
movie.
No.
No,
I
it's,
knew you weren't talking
Yeah.
about that one.
yeah, Charlie Sheen, 24 guy.
Yeah.
And,
Kiefer Sutherland.
Kiefer Sutherland.
And Oliver Platt and Rebecca.
Oliver Platt.
Yeah. Oh God, he's Porthos the pirate.
Oh,
Oh, he's the best Porthos the pirate.
and the D'Artagnan, played by
Is Chris
Robin.
O'Donnell.
Chris O'Donnell, there we
Yeah.
go.
And,
Lovely and great reboot.
Oh, it's an amazing, amazing movie.
Gabrielle Anwar plays the queen. The king has this really creepy nose.
His nose is a
cool
character.
dude
And
plays
can we
Rochefort,
forget
and Tim Curry.
Michael
is
Wincott
awesome.
is Rochefort, and Tim
Yes.
Curry is the Cardinal.
Yeah, so I would actually throw out that as probably one of my all-time favorite, retellings, reboots, whatever you want to call it. But
Oh, that
just because I love it,
is-
so it's a great, it's the classic tale. It doesn't deviate from the main story really too much. I mean, it does in the end and stuff, but through
It
the
takes what we
classic
loved about these
storylines,
characters.
exactly. And that's what you really want, is for them to take, to be perfectly honest, I wouldn't really care about the Star Trek reboot had they not blown up Vulcan.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's talk about Star Trek, because that's a good example of something that what they did, part of it wasn't a reboot and part of it was, but for instance, Star Trek, there was the original series. Then there was Star Trek The Next Generation. That was not a reboot. That was a continuation with the story. Everything that happened in the original Star Trek still happened.
I don't know. I would still call it a reboot because it was reinvigorating a dead franchise.
Oh yeah, but they kept their continuity, therefore it wasn't
They
a
didn't
reboot.
retell it.
They didn't retell it. They just rebooted it.
Kick her ass and Captain.
Yes.
Yeah,
More interesting crew.
But this
in some ways.
this most recent movie is a reboot because they threw away continuity.
No, it's a reboot because they reinvigorated a dead series. It's a retelling because they threw away continuity.
Well, I mean, we got a new Captain Kirk. We got a,
He was a younger Captain Kirk. He was
True.
a character. He was
it
an
ended up being
actor
a
playing
prequel.
a
which,
younger.
It's funny.
Captain
He
Kirk.
took his reboot and then he turned it into a prequel.
Yes.
And that just messes with everyone's head now. So,
Yes.
In a good
thank
way.
you, JJ.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
And they made one of the least emotional characters one of the more emotional characters. That's another thing. But anyway.
Oh, he was always a broiling pit of emotion. You just couldn't read it behind that Leonard Nimoy coolness.
It comes out in the
he does cry in Naked Time.
the Frodo Baggins song.
So,
YouTube it.
good reboots.
I guess it is the Bilbo Baggins song. Good
Well, I
point.
have one.
Yes,
Yes.
that is.
Which will surprise you because this movie was probably rebooted before you were even born. But anyway, it's James M. Cain's The Postman Always Rings Twice.
Yeah.
Ooh.
And it had a wonderful movie way back in the 40s.
Yes.
And then was rebooted. Same story, but sexed up
Yep.
with Jessica Lange.
I would call that a retelling. It's a good
Okay,
example.
I'm lost again.
I think that
I'm
counts as a
sticking to
reboot.
my idea that a reboot is a franchise.
No. See, I would say this because, and this is a really. See, I would say it's in the classic Hollywood terms. of every 20 years we've just got to go back to the vault and remake everything.
See,
that's
it's
in there.
Remake.
Which
But
is
see,
a
I'd call that a
retelling.
reboot.
I don't call it
Because
a
you're
reboot.
rebooting that movie and bringing it up and bringing it back to the forefront.
Okay, just
And
to be
perfectly
clear,
honest,
Rebooting implies that there was momentum before for this movie, that it wasn't
The
just
Postman
a thing.
Rings Twice
well,
is
it was,
what
a,
the biggest
it was
thing
something
was.
that was made, but they didn't make a Postman Rings Twice 2.
It wasn't a series. That's the point.
Rings Twice,
You
the
can't
animated
with-
series.
Yeah.
That's
No,
the point.
you can't
It's
do it
like
with that
this. They made a movie,
But see,
which
I
is
would
good.
say you can
I'm into
reboot
making
a single
movie.
entity.
David, I am so sorry.
I'm
But seriously, I would say you
sorry.
can reboot a single entity in non-violating your law of franchising, because technically a franchise is the explosion of something. So if you look at an Alfred Hitchcock movie, okay, take a single, and actually those have been remade too. Look at Psycho. That's been a. That's
But you
been,
can remake anything.
But the point is that if you're going by the notion that you're reinvigorating this franchise, so
Yes.
take Psycho. You had Psycho back in the 60s, which is one of the most transformative movies of the 60s, blew up, the biggest thing ever.
Yeah.
Okay, it was on par with Catching Fire and the other
But
massive
it was
movies
a
of
thing.
today.
It was one thing.
Yeah, it stayed
It was a
thing,
wonderful
though.
thing that people loved. It was a thing, but it wasn't a thing that was continuing to go somewhere. That
But
they
see, I would
kept
say
making
then
new stuff for.
it gets
That then lost
rebooted.
interest and then needed a reboot.
And see, I would say it got rebooted into
you
a
can get
movie and then into a television show and then everything else. So technically by that...
Now you can reboot the Bates Motel television show, because the television show is something
But see,
that
I would
is
say that's
continuing
all
to be
still a
made.
reboot of the original Psycho.
May I
That's
cut
not
in?
a reboot, though.
May I cut
That's a
in?
retelling. It's an adaptation.
I think we are still confusing terms or conflating terms.
Yes,
I
definitely.
think what we're doing, a reboot, like Jenna said, can reinvigorate a series, bring new life, bring new people into the fandom of that series. But that itself does not make a reboot, because remakes can do that very same thing.
Yes.
So I would like to differentiate the language we use between reboot and remake. Reboot is specifically, there is a continuity, we're resetting it.
So
So-
what happened before no longer counts as canon.
Because what happened before was no longer interesting and profitable to your fan base.
Well, that-
See, I
So
don't
on-
think that's an
wait,
essential
wait,
part of the
wait.
definition.
I have to agree. Because you can remake something because the fan base is not interested in it anymore. Like, didn't they try to do that with...
I think the point I'm trying to make is that there's a peter out. Like, it peters out. Like, there's
Yeah.
a loss of interest over time, and then you reboot something to give it new interest.
See, I think that might be the motivation for reboots, but I don't think
Yeah.
that's part of the definition of reboots.
I have a really hard time saying that Psycho was rebooted. Retold, remade, yes. Because it was a thing that existed, that was wonderful, but it was one thing. It wasn't like you could reboot a series of, like a line of toys. It doesn't have to be a television show. The point is, it's a property that was generating things, more things than just one thing. Just
Yeah,
lots of things, but soon after a while, there was more things than there was interest. And then you reboot it to give it a fresh new.
See, again,
taste.
I think you're confusing the reasons for a reboot with the actual definition of reboot.
You know what, guys? I love y'all. I love all of us. We're great people. I'm bored with the definition talk. I want to talk about actual things that have been rebooted or reimagined or remade or redone. And
Okay,
I have been waiting for this talk specifically to hear Jennifer tell me about Transformers.
I don't want to anymore.
No, this is the worst thing ever.
Okay,
Let's talk about every 60s and 70s television show.
All right.
You've got the Brady Bunch, that's been rebooted. You had, so now the question is, are you calling this a remake or a reboot?
Well, what makes a good retelling of
Chips
any
is about to
sort?
be rebooted. Dukes of Hazzard's been rebooted. Charlie's Angels was rebooted.
Can we discuss what makes a good reboot / retelling / remake? Because I feel like there are certain things that you have to keep, regardless of what you do to the continuity, in order to have the soul of the show or movie series or books, except that it's not really books.
See, I think actually you can do it in books too.
Comics. More.
Well, not just comics, but like Nancy Drew has been rebooted. Hardy Boys has been rebooted.
My childhood.
No, I think, but I'm not sure. You actually read the reboot.
All right. So what makes a good reboot, though?
I would throw out that what you really need to do is keep the core. If you take something like Star Trek, when J.J. Abrams came in, he didn't, he still gave us Captain Kirk and, Spock and Uhura and, you know, all the characters we knew and loved. He gave us the Enterprise, because the Enterprise is, hands down, one of the most important things about that story. Now, he gave us the same aliens. It's not like he brought in a whole group of new people that we had never heard before. You know, so by keeping that canon, it allows you to then expand out and blow up Vulcan and do whatever you want to do to screw up the story, have, you know, future Spock meet old Spock, and they're all living together now in the same world. You know, you can do that because we're still invested in a story that resonates with us as the originals. Now, something like Star Wars, and I'm going to throw it out there, it's not a reboot, it's not anything, it's continuation. However, what I think people are angry about in the 1, 2, and 3 is that a lot of what we knew about in 4, 5, and 6 was changed. So, Jedi changed, the Sith were different, the Empire was different, the Rebels were different, everything. Midichlorians. I mean, we got all kinds of craziness thrown at us. Now, personally, I love it. We were talking about before, and I'm not going to get into it. But it doesn't matter. The point is that it changed too much from what I think people were expecting. And I think that's why JJ's gone back to trying to bring back that kind of old Star Wars feel, the 70s, 80s Star Wars. And I think with Star Trek, that has changed to the point of, because he kept it, people have accepted that reboot.
I'm not so sure they've accepted it. But
they've accepted it. It's a franchise, and it's still going to be made into another movie.
Yeah. Fedora's been waiting.
Yes.
I think you have a really good point, Brad, which it applies equally well to, and I don't want to get on this reboot topic thing again, but it applies equally well to any series, I think, or any adaptations, or any reboots for that matter, whatever they are. And it is simply that there are certain things that your reader or the television viewer or the movie viewer takes to heart in any movie, any book, any television show. And if somehow the next thing in the series or the next reboot can capture that, then it too will be successful. But if they fail, if their instincts are wrong, if they pitch out the wrong stuff or too much stuff, then it'll flop.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And I haven't seen the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, and I haven't seen the old one since I was a kid. But the new movie, for example, originally in the new movie, originally it was going to be, forget about the teenagers, they were going to be Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they were going to be aliens, not actual turtles. And apparently there was such an uproar that they changed it back, so now they're, actual mutated turtles again.
Well, I've never seen Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the cartoon. I've seen the movie, one of them, with Jen at the Tivoli, and I'm objecting to that because it goes against the very name of what they are.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. If they're not mutant turtles who are ninjas
this is
and
why
teenagers,
the name of the movie is just Ninja
then
Turtles.
there's a problem.
It was gonna be.
Yeah.
But that's just it. There was such an they were going to basically give them a brand new origin story, and there was such an objection they had to put back the original origin story.
I think that goes to what Fedora was saying and what Brad was saying. If you don't retain the core, the heart of whatever it is that you're rebooting, remaking, retelling,
or if they
whatever.
misunderstand what the core really is.
I think misunderstanding the core is probably more common than purposely not retaining it.
That's definitely what happened to Ninja Turtles in the planned retelling, was that they misinterpreted why people were coming to see Ninja Turtles. It wasn't because, and I think they still misinterpreted it, because from what I hear about this movie, it wasn't because they kick people, and it wasn't because they are turtle-shaped, and it wasn't because of April O'Neil. We loved the Ninja Turtles as children and as adults, and we still love them today because we know who those people are.
And they wear fedoras.
Sometimes.
They're named after Renaissance painters.
Yes,
that's all
it's
we cared about.
we know it's in the theme song of the cartoon. We know who each of these characters are. We want to come see our characters, because in the essence of any story is character. And character is like friends. We're coming to see our friends. We might see them do the same thing we saw them do last time we were here, but they're our friends, and when you change them too much, then it feels offensive to us.
So it's giving characters in a show you love a makeover. but not changing who they are.
And we can go back to Elementary for a minute. They changed Watson into a woman, but in the end, Watson is still the one who's running after Sherlock, and Sherlock is all this brilliant stuff, and Watson's getting kind of annoyed, but also learning to be really close with this man that's hard to understand and coming to understand him, and we can see that relationship grow. That relationship is the heart of the Sherlock Holmes franchise sort of thing. That's what is repeated in every single retelling.
Actually, Sherlock himself changes a whole lot between different retellings. If you watch them back to back, it's obvious how different the different Sherlocks are.
But the thing they always have, every Sherlock has their Watson, and every Watson has their Sherlock. Fedora?
Well, I think that leaving them wanting more, which is the whole idea of a cliffhanger, the whole idea of mysteries, is one of the things that will make a reboot or a continuing series successful. Take, for example, I guess it was a television series first that you all like to talk about a lot, Firefly. Firefly had legs. People wanted it after it was off the air. It only went, 3
It went 13 episodes.
13 episodes. But then they demanded, really, that there was a movie.
Yeah.
And the movie turned out to be pretty darn good. I thought,
it was a good movie.
Serenity. It was a good movie. I wonder if it would not have been a good movie if it had not had the original cast.
No.
If it had somebody else other than Nathan Fillion as the captain.
Yeah.
Would it have been a success then?
No.
It would not have been the same, because we would be coming back for Firefly, the crew. The relationships between the crew.
I would throw out that if they'd waited too long and Nathan couldn't do it because he's old and gray now, had they recast but kept the characters that we know and loved and had them all, and had even kept each one of them, and then kept Serenity and kept the world of kind of a space western, kept that feel of it, I think it could still be successful, because I believe that the actor, though, is whom I love and whom I identify with. In reality, it's the character that I really love and I'm truly connected to.
But
and
can
that's
they
what I care
play
about.
that character?
That's a question.
Yeah.
See, if this hypothetical movie created, we'd have to wait and see how they do.
A good
I would
actor
put forth
should be
timing.
able to.
I would put forth timing. If they were to
People would still want
recast
stuff.
to make Serenity, the number of years after Firefly would have been very important. Because if they could have gotten the original cast,
and see, that's
and
my
they
thing.
didn't, then I think, as a fan of the show, I would have been like, why didn't they get the original people? They could have played these people. Why are they recasting? So if it were like 20 years later, 50 years later, though, I can see why they wouldn't recast.
Success.
And I would be more able to invest in these new actors for the same characters.
It's this makes me think of something. It hasn't happened yet, but they always talk about making a Halo movie. If the main character of the Halo franchise is a guy in a full suit of body armor, we never see his face, but we hear his voice. If they made that movie and the voice that came out of that helmet, no matter what it looked like, was not Steve Downes, I would be upset, because it would be so easy for them to get him to reprise his voice. That's one reason why I loved the Transformers movie when it came out, was because they got Peter Cullen to be Optimus Prime again. I was gonna go see my Optimus Prime on the screen. Later he was horribly abused beyond his right need to be. In the later movies, when they just kick his can around like he's nothing, and they confuse him on screen with all the other flying bits of metal that doesn't do anything. He has no character, he's just there to either get kicked or to punch other people. Then he commits outright murder in the third one, and he rides Grimlock like a horse in the fourth one. But the point is that the first movie, when I went there and I saw my robots transform, and it made the sound... And my favorite character, Bumblebee, was one of the stars. I went back and saw it 5 times, even though it was terrible, because I loved it. I saw the second one twice in the same day and would be okay if I never saw it again. Riff Tracks didn't even save that movie.
Wow. So what changed between the first one, which was
nostalgic?
Yes, and the ones after, which became a problem.
The first one tapped into my love of Transformers.
Wow.
The second one was a self-flagellating festival of coarse humor and pointless action set pieces and bad dialogue.
It wasn't
and
your
poor
show.
pacing and pretty much everything.
This seems to be getting into what
You heard the
what you
rant.
and I were talking about.
Well, as I was going to say, the first one of the Transformers movies holds true-ish to the characters we loved from the television
It does
shows.
change a lot, but
changed
the
a lot, but-
characters for the most part are there.
However, when you hit 2, when you hit 3, like the Indiana Jones movies, we'll just forget about the 4th one. But however,
was a
when you
4th one?
There
when
was
you
no
get
4th
into
one.
that, you're starting to remove yourself from those beloved characters.
There's a telephone effect.
Yeah, and so by the end of it, I'm not caring as much because it's not Optimus Prime versus Megatron in the classicness with Bumblebee at his side, with Soundwave,
Who's
and,
now a satellite, sounds
Yeah.
like Dr. Claw floating in space.
he
with,
showed
like,
next. I
weird
needed
silver-
Starscream next to Megatron,
Okay,
and
but
constantly
I
trying
think
to
the point
win
is-
over.
You no longer cared about the characters. So if the characters,
characters
had
aren't even
turned-
there.
If
No,
you had
it's not a
turned into
character.
somebody, for instance, if they had changed it, maybe changed it just as much, but you had cared about these new characters,
They
then you
killed
might have liked it.
Ironhide.
I have a question then.
Yeah.
That's
He
just
was the
wrong.
only one left.
Yeah, you can't kill Ironhide. I don't know.
So if they had in these in the Transformers new movies, if they had taken the characters that everyone knew and loved in the first movie and built upon them in a way that seemed believable to fans of those characters for their own narrative journeys.
You wouldn't have people leaving theaters. They'd literally just sit there
It
and then
wouldn't-
hand their money back and be like, here, I'm going to sit here for the next one, too.
It wouldn't be a joke now. Because it's turned into the example that people cite. The Transformers movies is the example of the idiot popcorn face stuffer movie. You don't go there for fulfillment of your emotional or mental faculties. You go there to watch flashing lights, hear loud sounds, and eat lots of popcorn.
So
It's a good time.
So how much can you change in a retelling of any kind then?
You can change a whole lot if your new story is also good.
No, see,
So,
I would say
I
as
mean,
long
in
as
the-
you keep the core, you get to play and do what you want.
I'm just jumping real quick because we'll get yelled at if we don't mention that Transformers has done this to itself in the past.
Oh, yeah.
The Transformers movie from 1980s, the animated movie, Transformers the movie, murdered the original cast on screen.
Yes.
Everyone died except for like Bumblebee, but then he got a new head and chose a new name, and I didn't like it.
It was really weird. I didn't get
It was
that
strange,
either.
and the motivation for that was they wanted to reboot their franchise
Pump
by
new toys. They
introducing
had new
new
toys
toys.
out. Yeah.
They wanted to show their new toys and have all the kids want to play with their new toys, and then they commissioned like, I'm making up a number, 60 episodes of season 3 of the Transformers cartoon show. And that show did not do as well as the 11 or 12 episodes of the first series that they had in syndication because new characters, the audience felt like they'd watched their friends get bludgeoned to death on television, and they
Yes.
weren't ready to commit to this new batch of people because they felt like they were stealing from the old.
It must be Optimus Prime, and he must be a giant red freaking truck.
Yes. Although he was a fire truck in the animated series,
Yeah.
it was still okay.
Yeah.
So how much can you change in a retelling in a series? I mean, like you have the first movie reboot, say of Star Trek, and it goes along to the sequel to that movie. How much do you have to retain? Like, how much can you change of these characters while retaining the core of a series? Because it sounds like they didn't do that very well in Transformers at all.
Well, if you take Star Trek, okay, Captain Kirk is still a womanizer. He's still the first one to run in and punch somebody. That hasn't changed from when William Shatner played him.
He's the impulsive guy.
That needed to be there because Captain Kirk is one of the most impulsive, type A, people, the alpha males that have been put on screen. Spock had to be a scientist, had to be logical, had to have that air of, eruditeness to him. That just you still had to retain that. Bones still had to be that country doctor.
But speaking of that, they pretty much wrote off Bones, but yeah.
Well, no, I
still
actually
there.
really like what Carl Urban did.
Okay.
He did a really good portrayal of Bones. I mean, he's not turning to the camera every 5 minutes and going, I'm a doctor, not an engineer. But he actually does throw those lines in there a couple times, and it's hilarious. But he's running around, and he's still the country doctor who's trying to fix all these ailments and do all these things, and he, is still content. There's. I kind of wish there was more of the three friendship, relationship of the old. But I understand why they haven't done that. However, we had Uhura. She's still a strong black woman, but she's kind of been recast now. Now she's much more involved and running around and part of the, the crew and the power structure of the crew.
And the love stories.
And there's a love story.
With Spock!
With Spock, not Scotty. I mean, in the last one she got James Doohan, so I think we might have a step up here.
I was sad. I liked Scotty and Uhura.
And see, Scotty's another one. A great revamp of a character. He's still incredibly smart. He's still kind of out there and a little wacky. He's still willing to kind of skirt Starfleet regulations in order to do what he wants to do. So it's kind of a thing in the sense of they kept a lot, but they changed enough.
All right.
Well, I would like to see what you think the portion of the writer is in all of this. Let's take, for example, James Bond. Yes. When Ian Fleming died, ever since, we've had lots more Bond films, we've had lots more Bond books written by Kingsley Amis and lots of people, John Gardner, who are pretty good writers. How has that affected the series, the reboot, whatever you want to call it? What happens when you lose your writers?
Well, it's happened also to the Bourne Identity and a few of the others. It's not just it's not just Bond, but you're right. And to be honest, personally, if I were an author and I got handed one of these canons, these just mythical canons that are out there, and somebody were to hand it over and say, here you go, from now on, you're in charge, I think I personally would be incredibly afraid that I'm not going to live up to that expectation of James Bond. I mean, how do you go there? But at the same time, I think it would be a wonderful opportunity to kind of get to go in there and really go into the depth of that character and explore them. So I think for a writer, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's probably the greatest opportunity you're going to get, the ability to revamp that. But on the other hand, the amount of crushing responsibility would be huge.
Well, here's an interesting bit. I don't know if so much it's the writer, but it's also the passion. We mentioned Star Wars earlier. Star Wars, the original 3 films made back, in the first round, they weren't all written by George Lucas. They were written by a bunch of people, but they were working together on a project that they really loved and putting ideas together and made something that really caught on with the general public. When George Lucas came back to make the prequels, they fell short because he did not have all the passion for the universe. He wanted to make movies. He was there to have fun and make movies, but his passion wasn't necessarily for the integrity of the characters in the universe he was playing in. On the other hand, the people he hired to make the Clone Wars animated television show, they had that passion, and I think that cartoon show is better than those 3 movies because it's the people who were working on it had a passion for the world and the characters in the world, and they paid attention to the expanded universe, and they brought in all these things that gave a lushness and a vibrance and a soul to it that I felt lacked in the prequels for the most part, because the prequels were more of a fun pet project when it came to the writing aspect. George really loves making cool alien things and fancy set pieces and props.
Well, he fully admitted it. He had the technology to finally do what he wanted to do, which is create the beautiful worlds, create the technology, exactly what she's talking about. He
wasn't there to write meaningful dialogue. He was there to show all of the cool toys that he wanted to show off. Which, there's also a valid thing in that.
And it was gorgeous.
It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. But he needed maybe to hand the script writing job to someone else.
How about the Bourne?
Bourne Identity?
All of the 3 original ones. Robert Ludlum died, and now we have Jeremy Renner in the Bourne Legacy. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't that one live up to the others? And I don't think it comes even close. I will tell you that just off the top.
I think it did not. Well, I like the Bourne movies, and I like Jeremy Renner, and I like the Legacy movie because he was in it. But I think it was missing some of the heart that the Bourne movies had.
See, I would actually throw in that this is going back to the time thing that we were getting on before.
Mm-hmm.
The reboot with Jeremy Renner came too soon after the Matt Damon movies.
Oh,
it's
really?
just a few years. And I understand that need to want to continue the series and try and find a new way to revamp it, reboot it, and get a new series out there. But on the other hand, what we all really wanted was a new Jason Bourne movie, not a Jeremy Renner movie, you know. And I love you, Jeremy. You're awesome as Hawkeye, and you're there. But, you know, and I love the movie, actually. I've seen it. I really enjoyed the the Bourne Legacy. But what I really wanted was Jason Bourne.
It did not belong under that title.
No.
I think
wasn't
having
a
that
Bourne
title
movie.
was more of a noose than it was anything else, because it would have been fun to see that movie, just period. But it wasn't what I signed up for.
We only have 1 minute left,
is
so
true.
we should probably think about closing statements.
All right. Final
see.
thoughts on reboots?
I think that there's a lot. I would love to talk about to have another session about like the art of retelling or the art of sequeling. Or,
Maybe like remakes, like movie remakes, story remakes.
like talking about more about like this Jason Bourne stuff, about what happened too soon, how long should one wait, what are the changes, the different circumstances that would make one situation good while the other situation was bad.
And we could bring it back to books instead of just movies.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of ground to cover
but
in
it's hard
here.
to reboot a book.
There's you can reboot a character, like you can bring a
Yeah.
character back, but it's hard to
You
say.
can't really reboot a book.
It's like the book has been written, so write a different.
You can
book.
reboot a series of books, though.
And it might be interested to talk also about influence, like especially in books, people who books you've read that you can tell were obviously influenced by another book.
Yeah.
That happens a lot currently in books being produced, that people who they call trend chasing, like lots of people went and read the Hunger Games, and now we see a lot of Hunger Games inspired books out there.
The way that Three Musketeers turned into a steampunk movie.
Yeah, that kind of thing. The way that I'd love to see the whole reboot idea attacked more from an inspiration angle. What inspired them to redo the Three Musketeers as a steampunk movie? It's like, was it because they had a passion for steampunk, or was it because steampunk was in now?
They wanted cool clockwork tech. I think that's all.
See, there you go.
Well, I would say that whether you're talking about rebooting or extending a series or any of that, it's a knife that cuts both ways. Because yes, you get a degree of the familiar. A lot of stuff that the writer does not have to give out again because it's already there and the readers already know it. But at the same time, you are risking all if you don't at least measure up to the original. And sometimes, even if you create something that's equally compelling, it's going to lose in comparison to the original. So I think it's a knife that cuts both ways.
I would say stick to the core, change the rest, and definitely go see Reboot, the cartoon show.
Yes, reboot the game. Season 3, it really picks up.
There's a song, too.
There's a song about Season 3.
No, I've been making my comments known as...
Well,
Wrap it up.
I suppose my final thought would be then, if you are retelling anything, please do it because you're passionate about it. And if you can't be that, please respect the people who are. Tell a good story. And, yeah.
Tune in next week
For another episode of Right Back Radio.
The Right Back would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their bookstore. STL Books and Gifts is St. Louis's newest independent bookstore with an emphasis on fine literature for adults and children and the most comprehensive selection of St. Louis books available anywhere. Visit them online at stlbooks.com or in person at 100 West Jefferson Avenue, Kirkwood, Missouri 63122. Tune in next week as the Right Pack will conquer yet another pondering issue in the writing industry. Theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her.